X, your portal to the unknown. I'm your host, Gary Buechler from Nerdrotic, also known as Nerdrotic. There, it's written right for me. I spent a decade running a comic book store in San Francisco and have been a longtime commenter on pop culture, especially the geeky and the supernatural, as you may or may not know from my show Forbidden Frontier. From comics to comics anomalies, we cover it all here. So whether you're here to explore ghost stories, unravel UFO sightings, or dive into the depths of the unexplained phenomena, you've come to the right place. Let's get started on today's journey into the paranormal. And today on Paranormal X, we're thrilled to have its founder, Mark Victor, join us. Mark is a seasoned screenwriter, producer, and a key figure in the supernatural and paranormal media space. His project, Paranormal X, is a hub for fiction, news, and any content that explores the unexplainable mysteries that science has yet to unravel. It's also important to note Mark's career as a writer in the entertainment industry, writing and producing iconic films such as Poltergeist and Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, which I love unapologetically, co-written with Mark Grace, the legendary director of direction of Steven Spielberg, and many, many more. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Greetings. Nice to be here and nice to hear your voice.
Again, because this isn't the first time we've met. It's the second.
Yes, we go way back.
Way back, like 2 days ago, right?
Is it 2 or 1?
Don't ask me.
Time has passed. I can't remember.
Right? But I am an admirer of your work. So first of all, I would love to know more about Paranormal X and what the company is all about.
Well, for years, I've thought that there really wasn't a go-to place for people who are interested in paranormal phenomena. So we decided, or have decided, to create a forum, a home, a community, whatever you want to call it, for those of us who are interested in what I call non-ordinary reality content, where people, they can go, interact, exchange information, experiences. The site will also create and distribute content that is non-ordinary. And this is sort of our launch, and we're looking forward to having a fun and interesting time.
You know, and we need something like this. I've been complaining on my show Forbidden Frontier that there just isn't this one big hub for us to go to and cover events and get the latest news. So this will be great. We will go to it often because it's missing in the field, and there's so much going on right now, good and bad. I understand you have a comic book coming out. The comic book is based on the novel Time of Death. Tell us about the premise of the story.
Well, the novel for me was really appealing. It's sort of a roller coaster, a fun ride, and it's a story about redemption using the supernatural element of time travel. And time travel, for me is fascinating, and I think it is for most people. If you stop and think about all the fun we have with movies like Back to the Future, Terminator, even Hot Tub Time Machine, time travel always fascinates us. And for me, I like to, time travel always has rules and conundrums, but one of the parts that I really like, it allows the mind to go, what if? It's sort of like if you sit around with your friends and you say, what would you do if you won the lottery? So I think it's the similar thing with time travel. What would you do if you could go back in time and change one event in your life? What would it be? How would your life be different? And that's what our lead character winds up doing. But it's a fascinating area, and as you probably know, it's an area where it's now even being taught in schools. like MIT talks about string theory, dimensions, and time travel. So I guess the unthinkable, becomes a bit plausible, much like what we're doing now. Could you and I imagined 30, 50, 80 years ago that we're talking to each other on a screen across the country and relaying information back and forth like this? It wouldn't be fathomable. So there's a lot ahead of us.
It is crazy. But like in your book, there's a little quick follow-up question, which I read. It's not just, oh, I'm living my life and I have a regret. I didn't,
Right.
date the right girl. Without spoiling anything, it's a pretty good reason. It's a pretty good reason. I think that was important to present because a lot of us would just say, hey, if I changed that, I wouldn't be what I am now. But it's
Sure.
way different in the book.
Well, and I hear you. And, in this case, it's very dramatic and traumatic. It's our lead in it, his name is Kyle, makes a bad choice. A choice that many of us could have made at any time in our lives. And I'm sure I have without question. As a matter of fact, as an aside, I have a theory about this, that males between the age of 14 and maybe 22 or 23 probably had 5, insane acts due to our undeveloped brains where we could have been killed already or have killed others. So in our case, our lead character, he and his best friend, they get stoned, and Kyle must drive them to school so that his friend can arrive on time to take a final exam that is required in order for him to graduate. And wham, disastrous accident occurs, causing deaths, and Kyle is blamed for it. This event completely alters Kyle's life and his future. He goes from being a scholarship student on his way to college to being a prison inmate with no future at all, until there's the next critical event happens when a visitor arrives in prison who had a relative who died in the accident. She's there to tell him that he's going to get a silk ink blot, and that will arrive, and she doesn't know how, but it will allow him to go back in time, and he needs to go back in time and alter events. And what she suggests to him is, you need to go back way back before you were born, to when your father, and meet the person who will become your father, and convince him to stop you in the future from ever getting into that car. And as you can imagine, this task is uniquely difficult. They even get into a physical altercation, and who's going to believe him? So those are sort of the launch points in the story.
Any surprises you want to tease?
Well, I'd like to tease in general, but I guess we got to talk about surprises. There's no shortage of surprises in this thing. That's the fun of it. That's the roller coaster. We're going to ask or find out. Well, we're going to find out there was another person present at the accident who was a time traveler. Did that person have something to do with it? Is there a dead end to the future that's upcoming that our lead character learns about? And of course, in time travel, there are always rules. And those rules are sort of what screws everyone up. only certain people have the genetic makeup to time travel. And Kyle has to unravel the mystery of why he's one of those people. You also cannot be in the same space as your younger or older self. That's an absolute no-no. And of course, that will get violated, and the consequences there are surprising and astounding. And without giving too much away, let's just say changing the past may not always change the future the way one might expect. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And so this story has twists and challenges and turns, and Kyle's entire being in history comes into question, and alters the fabric of who he is.
You know, I got a chance to read it, and art's pretty good. I wasn't sure where it was going. I'm not going to spoil anything, and I'm intrigued. I'll say I'm intrigued, and if I wasn't, I wouldn't be doing this interview. So there, so where can the readers get their hands on this?
Well, that part I have written down so I don't make a mistake. Listen, I'm excited for your audience to get a chance to see the comic book. We have a Kickstarter running. You click the link in the video description here, and it'll go onto Kickstarter, and you can search Paranormal X or Weed Inc. And I hope the people who do this find it to be a thrilling, thought-provoking, and fun ride, like all of us had in trying to get it into a comic book format.
It'll be exciting. I thank you for your time, and hopefully the book does really well. And when people get to see a preview of it, you can decide for yourself. Of course, you can click on the link in the video description here, which we will, on my side, we will be doing shortly, onto Kickstarter, and search Paranormal X for Weed Inc. That is the title of the book, Weed Inc. And ink, well, has something to do with it. I hope you find it thrilling and thought-provoking, and it's kind of in our sphere here. We like to, we like comics, and we like to get a little weird and esoteric. So thanks, Mark.
Well, thank you. I will think of you as esoteric, and remember, it's never too soon or too late to become a Cub fan.
Never. How about those 84 Cubs? So I just want to put it out there as a Padre fan.
He just wanted to depress me before we finished.
You Cub fans need to stop whining. You won a World Series, okay? You got your World Series.
Gary, we can now commence the Cub interview, which will take 2 hours.
Sure. So you and I were both at the same game at the
yes,
84.
We were. Yeah, you probably tossed a beer on my back from about 10 rows behind me when I got up to cheer.
I was 14, so I wasn't drinking in front of my dad, who was there. So otherwise, I would have.
You should have sat with me.
Yeah, with our seats, we were in the cheap seats for that one, but it was awesome seeing Garvey just destroy your Cubs. It was beautiful.
All right, this is painful, so I'm getting off now. I hope everyone enjoys the comic book. And Gary, you're a great host, and you should do this for a living.
You think? Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Hey, you're a pretty good writer. You should probably write scripts or stuff.
Well,
in Hollywood.
We have no choice, do we? All righty. Thank you.
Take care, Mark. I see the chat in there. Hail, Mark. And now we have our next guest. Who is going to be smarter than me. Okay. But that's most of the guests, to be honest with you. If around my parts, the audience is very familiar with this. We have Mitch Horowitz. Is a prolific writer and editor deeply immersed in the world of the occult and esoteric. See, that's where I had that word esoteric in my head because I usually don't use it. His acclaimed works such as Occult America and the Miracle Club explore the mysterious intersections of spirituality and American history as a respected voice in the realms of metaphysics and mysticism. Mitch brings a wealth of knowledge from his years as the editor-in-chief of, how do I pronounce this, Mark? I don't want to mess it up. Is it Tarker or Tarcher?
Tarcher.
Tarcher. Okay, TarcherPerigee. Yeah. My apologies. Like I said, I'm dumb. Please join me in welcoming a truly enlightened figure in contemporary spirituality, Mitch Horowitz. Welcome to the show. Hello, Mitch. Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Good to be here, man.
It's fantastic. This is going to be an interesting little topic here because we're going to talk about time travel, okay, amongst other things, but we're going to talk about time travel.
Did you really throw a beer on Mark's back when you were 14 years old?
No, I would have, though. If he was a Cubs fan and my dad wasn't there, absolutely. I would have poured it out slowly and then laughed. But that would have been a waste of beer when I was drinking back then. And I was drinking when I was 14. That's a long story. So let me get myself organized here. My apologies. This is my first real interview. Can you tell? You probably tell. Okay, so we got this. My notes are blowing all over the place because it's hot as the surface of the sun in here because I'm in Texas.
Yeah, I had to close my window just now. I'm in Brooklyn, and of course, the dump truck comes up the street just as we're beginning our conversations.
Oh, yes, a big city living. I remember it well and don't miss it. But
believe me.
I'd love to talk to you about the foundations of time travel and quantum physics for a second. If you're in your work, you explore how thoughts can influence reality and tie into quantum mechanics. In the comic, time weaving is a key concept where characters can alter timelines. How do you see the principles of quantum physics supporting or contradicting the idea of time travel that Mark Victor has depicted in the comic book? What can I add? One thing too? Yeah, and to us lay people, it's the consequences of, is it creating another reality or is it changing that timeline? What do you think?
These are some of the key questions for our generation. In fact, I would say that quantum data, quantum theory, not only supports Mark's thesis, but in fact dictates that time slips or time travel, whatever we want to call it, are a logical necessity, not only possible, but an actual necessity, as real as the words I'm speaking right now. We are brought up to think of time as a linear phenomena, like a river flowing, and you can never step in the same part twice. And that kind of commonsensical view of reality, that kind of iteration of how things feel, is actually a terrible guide to what's really going on, because we've understood since the dawn of classical quantum physics experiments, at this juncture going back about a century, that alternate outcomes are infinitely possible and depend upon measurement and perception. What else are our five senses but a biological means of measurement and perception? It's possible that we are, in effect, selecting among potential outcomes all the time, including at this very instant. So if we think about, where am I from? Where was I born? What did my mom and dad do for a living? What were their names? The answers come to us instantly. Those answers may be acts of perception that, based upon our belief about ourselves, the world that we live in, our measurement of reality, are changing constantly.
That makes my brain hurt a little bit, but those are also the things. Apologies to the Paranormal X audience. I thought about a lot when I was tripping on acid, but it's
all that year at age 14.
Yeah, especially it's cool that, like, you know, many years later we're seeing science. Not that we need science, you know, not that science is perfect, because it's not. But it's see them taking this on, and, you know, Michio Kaku was one of the earliest ones I saw even talking about string theory. Love that guy, by the way. He's one of the nicest guys out there, one of the most open-minded scientists. And it just gets stranger the more they get into it. And I love that, by the way. Absolutely love it. And, you know, you can get into all things like, you know, simulation theory. There's so many things you can do, which makes it a great concept for a comic book. You know, and yeah, you know, they've done it a little bit in science fiction. Talk a little bit about believability. Can you talk about the metaphysical concepts and inform our understanding of the time travel stories? What elements would you say are essential for grounding a comic book or a narrative in the semblance that's plausible?
In terms of the semblance that's plausible, the possibility of what we would colloquially call time travel or slipping in and out of different dimensions of time, the fact that the possibility exists doesn't mean that we can necessarily direct it. It's very unruly. We're not able to control many facets of our existence. For example, if intellect was the name of the game, if anything that I set my mind to within observable reality I could do, well, there would be no addictions, for example. There would be no overeating. There would be no outbursts of rage. People would say to themselves, I understand that that's not good for me, hence I won't do it. But the emotions have their own life. The body has its own life. The intellect has its own life. We're not able to control anything. Why should we be able to control the places that we occupy in time? I think one of the great questions that we face in the 21st century is that if we can relate to this material, then we have to ask ourselves the question of whether we can actually do anything with it. It's like describing the weather. I can't, to my knowledge, change the weather, but I can certainly describe weather patterns, and they're chaotic. Can an individual slip back and forth in time based upon determined perception? It's a hell of an interesting question. And it's something that a lot of metaphysical writers, the most brilliant among them, Neville Goddard, have experimented with. But whether we can control these forces or we're just passive objects of forces that are greater than us, that's probably my biggest objection. Not that it's implausible. Not only is it plausible, it may be necessary, but whether we can control it is another story.
Talk a little bit about the ethical debate on manipulating time. In most time travel stories, there are consequences, and Mark Victor's comic for Wheat Inc. on quantum physics is no different. But what's your perspective on the metaphysics and the power of it? And are those, what are the ethical implications of it? Which, I mean, I would argue it's totally unethical, but that's me. But still, it doesn't mean it's going to stop us from doing it. Of time manipulation, are those founded in philosophy or science?
Well, the ethics are a very fraught question, especially on the intimate or the psychological level alone. If the individual were capable of going into the so-called past and altering something, reversing a regret or something of that nature, it could erase from a person's life those personality traits that are in fact most mature, most well-adjusted. Because if any individual asks him or herself, well, what are the aspects of my character that I'm most proud of? What am I best at? What are my areas of greatest resilience? Almost all of that comes out of some kind of suffering or another. My partner, Jacqueline Castel, who's a film director, always says there's an intimate relationship between excellence and suffering, between excellence and suffering. Those things that we venture to fix in our lives often serve to create the parts of us that are most mature, most capable, most resilient, most reliable. So if you erase a tragedy, you could be erasing the very springboard that has made you the person who you want to be. So there are psychological possibilities, intimate possibilities. Forget about the macro global questions, the whole kind of, do I come back and the apes have taken over? That's a big question in its own right. But if there's psychological truth to any of this, I would say be very careful with it. But it may or may not even be within our power. It may be, as I referenced, that we're doing this constantly and all the time. And if there are different and, in fact, infinite slips of reality, it could be, in fact, that a regret is felt. Maybe it's felt right now. Maybe your listeners have articulated a regret in the past millisecond of their existence, and their perception of reality, subject to this particular time slip that we find ourselves in, has completely changed based on that. But maybe there's another intersection of time. This is sort of getting into string theory, where something coexistent but completely different has occurred because you didn't go back and forth in so-called time, or maybe you did, but you did something entirely different. So in other words, if everything exists in potential, if there's an infinitude of possibilities in existence, it could be that all these outcomes, both those that we embrace and those that we fear, are occurring right now.
The potential. You make me think of Doctor Who, feeding off potential energy. The Weeping Angels, which is such a great concept. But, man, I could go down this rabbit hole with you.
I know, it's a mother,
We were discussing on Forbidden Frontier, like, what if, each day we wake up, we're just flowing through different realities, and it looks like a linear life to us.
I think that's a very reasonable supposition. It's funny. You referenced string theory earlier. The reason string theory was developed, and in brief, string theory is the idea that everything that exists, exists along these bands of undulating strings that cut in between different intersections of time or different dimensions. And sometimes stuff goes on in one of these different dimensions that affects stuff in the dimension that we're aware of. And this is what theorists used, for example, to explain contradictions in nature. There are contradictions between relativity, for example, and quantum physics. There are contradictions between molecular theory, the manner in which particles, both subatomic and molecular particles, are attracted to one another, and gravity. And we put up with these contradictions because the stuff works. The data works. It's reality, empirically speaking. And theorists have used string theory to ask the question of whether we're being affected all the time by weather systems, so to speak, that we can't see, but that control stuff or change stuff within our own frame of reality. It's just a theory. It's just a concept of reality, but it exists because things that we might have considered impossibly weird 100 years ago are not so weird anymore. And in fact, Einstein's theories of time bending have been proven. Einstein postulated that time bends in conditions of extreme velocity or extreme gravity, like a black hole. Now dig this. Astronauts in our own era, while they're moving nowhere near the velocity of light speed, they do undergo minute but measurable reductions in the aging process because of the extreme speeds at which they're traveling. It's actually empirically traceable. It's surreality, and yet it's real. There it is. Einstein was correct. Linearity is not real. It may be a necessary illusion. It's overwhelmingly persuasive, but it's not an ultimate law. And when one imbibes that, and I mean, this is 100-year-old science, when one imbibes that, life starts looking really weird.
Yes. You make me think of the two twin astronauts, Mark Kelly. Is it Mark Kelly? One of the two. They sent one up to the space station. They were identical twins, and one was like a millisecond, one age slower than the other. So they did the actual science on it. So they had one in the space station, one on Earth, and then one of the twins became older, which was crazy. And
it's crazy. And as you said, it's minute, but it's actual, it's real, it's measurable.
Yeah.
It's reality. Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
It really is.
Talk about the physical harm of time travel. In Weed Inc. and Quantum Physics, one of the characters experiences extreme psychological consequences and pain. And considering what I saw him go through, which I can't say, I would understand. What do you believe are the primary risks of time travel on the body?
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't know if there are risks on the body per se, but I think that the orientation that we experience, we live under laws, not laws, but overwhelming perceptions of linearity, a sense of past, present, future, entropy, we orient ourselves by understanding reality as being singular and unrepeatable. And if that fabric starts fraying, it may be very hard for an individual to continue navigating through life. It may be very hard for an individual to forget, so to speak, what he or she has witnessed. And no matter how many times, for example, you might repeat to a person the observation about those twin astronauts, and no matter how empirically real it is, it can't shake the realness of the clock on the wall, because those are the circumstances under which we live. But what if it did shake it for whatever reason? Maybe a person encountered an example that was so overwhelmingly tactile that it shook his or her sense of foundational reality. Look, I don't know. I don't know what an individual would go through. Maybe he or she would experience something that we would call psychosis. It could be very dangerous. Our sense of linearity, our sense of orientation, our sense of the singularity of objects like a chair might be necessary for five sensory beings to actually navigate our way through life. We lose that, we might lose our sense of self, and it might cause what would look like psychosis.
Yeah. Like your brain starts sinking to that timeline, and you start forgetting who you are. There's so many possibilities that would be horrifying. But I mean, I would like to go back and watch the pyramids being built, but I don't want to change anything.
I don't want to change anything. And imagine how frightening it could be, how disorienting, because we're probably wrong about just about everything, you know.
Right.
You'd be like, wait, this isn't what I saw on the National Geographic special last night. And it could be too much to bear.
Yep. All right. I think this is the part. Am I supposed to? Are we going to questions right now? But reserve the comic on Kickstarter. Don't forget to hit that link. And I think our link is going to be in our description soon. So we got some we got some audience questions here. So I'm gonna read them out of the corner of my eye. Does Mitch think deja vu is connected with time travel? That's a very good question. Very good question.
Simple answer, yes. I think it's a live possibility. I think it's worth entertaining. Now, of course, somebody giving a TED Talk somewhere would explain to me, no, deja vu is very easily explained by different areas of the brain lighting up. And the problem with the neurological explanation isn't that it's wrong, it's that it's presumed to be exclusive. There could be any number of things going on. Perhaps, I mean, I'm going to speak very loosely, but perhaps that's what the physical impact of so-called time travel looks like in the body, just like the release of endorphins might be what the placebo response or the spiritual appeal or whatever you want to call it looks like in the body. There might be dozens of things going on at once, and we've identified one of them. So I always have to be very careful when somebody finds a persuasive, mundane, or explanation for something. Bravo. But it doesn't mean it's the only thing that's going on. So I think the deja vu question is pertinent.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's the one thing that literally happens to everybody. You know,
it's freaky. Yeah.
It feels so real when it happens. And you're like, usually we all go, oh, something bad's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But, there's the ESP thing. And then some people might have, they're intuitive enough to know like something bad is going to happen, nothing specific. And we hear that a lot, but like deja vu happens to everybody. And it is definitely weird. And I agree with your summation there that it's a reaction. I think it's just a reaction, what they've found. But, you know, us monkeys, we like to explain everything. We like to explain everything.
Right. It's kind of the magic bullet theory. You know, as soon as I've grabbed an elephant's tail, if I'm blind, I'm persuaded it's a snake. It's not a snake. You know, there's something valuable in that experience. It's tactile, it's real, it's biological, but it ain't a snake.
Nope. How might time travel be achieved using hypothetical constructs like wormholes or cosmic strings?
Well, this is very interesting. This is actually a debate right now within the UFO community. Ruling out mundane explanations. Are are UFOs, if one's willing to go there, more likely to be extraterrestrial or interdimensional? And my contention is that we actually have better developed models, and they're just models of interdimensionality than we do of extraterrestriality. You mentioned cosmic wormholes. The idea being that if you introduce some exotic matter into time space, maybe you can create a black hole and there's some bending. And those are tantalizing theoretical possibilities. I would venture that something like string theory or the many worlds theory in quantum physics, which now goes back to the 1950s, are better developed than the wormhole idea, or the idea of bending time space in order to travel through it, which would be required for interstellar travel that wouldn't take thousands and thousands of light years. And so it's really tantalizing to think that we have better ways of explaining interdimensional travel, or time travel, so to speak, than we do of extraterrestrial travel. We have theories for both, but we have better developed theories for the interdimensionality angle.
And that's because they're actually talking about it now, which is great. I mean, it's been a while, but there was a time in my life where that's silly science fiction.
Exactly.
And the theories that
that criticism has quieted.
Oh, it has. And the theories that they've gotten into are weirder. So it's been cool. I like it.
Yeah.
Where do we find the most credible scientific experiments or observations that suggest time travel could be possible? What should I read or investigate?
Well, I source my material pretty well. So if you read my stuff, like, for example, I have a book called Daydream Believer, where I have a whole chapter on parapsychology, a very substantial chapter where I deal with some of this material. I deal with some of it in Miracle Club. I deal with some of it in a new book called Modern Occultism. I source the hell out of it. Go to my sources, parse my sources. If I've exaggerated, if I've got something wrong, call me out, because I really want people to look at these things very critically. My sources go to classical material. My sources go to very well replicated material from parapsychology, psychical research, and my sources go to places like Scientific American, that fount of occult passions. And I often say to people, if you think what I'm saying is far out, get yourself a subscription to Scientific American, because there's wilder things in there than the stuff that we've been discussing. So footnotes abound in my work, and they go to sources that are relatively easily accessed, not infrequently free. And I want people to read this stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That needs to be opened up and transparent. So, like, it's good. It's, a lot of stuff gets lost in scientific papers, and more people are bringing them out. And yes, a lot of them are behind paywalls. But the more you know, the better. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And it's weird, again, something like simulation theory is being it's taken seriously. It's being seriously talked about, and that was nuts. But it's actually something like I can kind of believe. And
I think it's funny. I can kind of believe it too. And if you talk to people from all different backgrounds, whatever their politics, whatever their economics, whomever, I think a majority of people would agree there's something not right going on around us. People have this feeling that there's an ersatz reality, and we process it through movies like Barbie, Truman Show, Matrix. And even though these movies present these wild scenarios, everybody gets it and everybody enjoys it. And look at Barbie. The thing showed in the US, showed in Saudi, showed in China. Those ideas that we're living in this ersatz universe, like the protagonist, people relate to them. And I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah. But do we want to know the reason for that? Do we really want to know? Do we want to see who's behind the curtain? 9. Can entangled particles be physically connected through one of the other dimensions we don't experience? Enable them to react instantly to a change?
That's such a great question. That question of entanglement, which Einstein somewhat derisively called spooky action at a distance, That question of entanglement is part of what gave birth to string theory, because the question that string theory addresses itself to is, what is this X force? What is this X force, if there is one, that caused micro particles and macro objects as well, which was an observation made by Isaac Newton. What causes relationships between these objects? What causes the entanglement? We don't have an answer to that. Relativity doesn't answer it. Quantum physics doesn't answer it. We as a human community are great at producing the empirical data. It's real. No one questions the phenomena of entanglement. No one. But why? Why is it so? It's a mystery. That's what string theory seeks to address. I mean, this is one of the most vexing questions of our time.
It is, and it's not one I can answer. Just for the Nerdrotic Live audience, we're not talking about the Jada Pinkett Smith form of entanglement. It's the scientific form of entanglement. Considering that we're traveling through space at high speed, wouldn't traveling back in time put us in the middle of an empty space where we are now located in the universe? Ooh, that's another good question.
Yeah, it could massively suck. I mean, it's the individual where, what does existence look like without these biological forms? We don't know. We don't know if there really even is existence outside these biological forms. I assume there is, based on various data, testimony, observation, but I don't know. And what would it require to probe that? I mean, these are fascinating questions. Non-local intelligence is a concept that has been significantly rejected by aspects of our media and aspects of academia, but only aspects. I mean, if you want to talk about non-local intelligence, about the individual having some kind of existence outside of familiar biology, you can talk about that with physicists, scientists, engineers, physicians. You cannot talk about that, however, with most, not all, most academic psychologists, people in the humanities, people in the social sciences. That's where the pushback comes from, which is weird. And it's a cultural topic all of its own. I guess there's a very deeply entrenched philosophical materialism or physicalism within that world. It's probably an outcropping of certain aspects of late 19th century thought, maybe Marx, Einstein, Freud, although Einstein and Freud were pretty flexible on these questions. So within those reaches of academia, the concept of non-local intelligence has been rendered verboten, and that's got to be fixed, because it's a hot question, it's a real question, and it's an informed question.
Agreed. Considering that I read that one. Jess Kickstarter early bird discounts start today. Weed Inc. and Quantum Physics comic book. Thank you very much. That's probably just Jess putting in there, and I read it like Ron Burgundy. I'll say Ron Burgundy. What does Mitch think of Eric Weinstein's view on string theory and the current state of physics?
I don't know Weinstein's view on that, so I can't comment. I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go. Well, okay. I don't know it either. I've watched part of that interview. Weinstein is a brainy guy. And definitely his Joe Rogan stuff is great. Absolutely great. How does the concept of retrocausality, I did it, fit into current scientific understanding of time travel?
Now, here's where the rubber hits the road, because this concept of retrocausality is something with which the individual can experiment himself. It comes out of the work of a clinical psychologist at Cornell named Darrell Bem. About 12 years ago, Bem published a paper on 10 years of experiments that he had done into precognition, or what he termed retrocausality. And in the most general sense, Bem found in 2 of his experiments, conducted across thousands of trials and since validated in a very large meta-analysis that if the individual studies for an exam, after taking the exam, studies in the so-called future, it spikes his or her score in the so-called present. The spike is slender, but very definite, consistent, and trackable. And it begs the question, as Ben put it, of whether we, in effect, can reach backwards in time to improve cognitive performance. And of course, these findings met with howls of pushback, and they have since been found confirmatory in a meta-analysis consisting of 90 experiments, including the originals, in 33 different labs in 14 different nations. In terms of stats, that's as good as it gets. And what he found was that if he gave a simple memorization test to subjects and they continued to study for the test after the fact, it spiked their score. So it feeds into this whole question of the many worlds theory, interdimensionality, the bending of time, whether it's something that is actually going on all the time. And all Ben measured for was cognition, nothing else. So we're really at the nascency of this inquiry. I write about it very heavily in recent books. I have an article at Medium and on Boing Boing called Is Precognition Real? You can read about it there. You can find all the source material, and it's something to experiment with. I mean, if people want to know, how can I get my hands around this? That's one way.
All right. Hey, Mitch, I was wondering if there was any science on competing timelines, or is that a complete other theory of a parallel universe kind of thing, which I have a hard time believing?
It is hard to believe. But I would take it even further. I would say that not only is there a logical necessity behind the existence of parallel universes, but I would say that there's a necessity behind infinite universes. This goes back to the Schrodinger's cat experiment, which I won't go into in any detail here, but Erwin Schrödinger in 1935 really revolutionized humanity's view of itself because he insisted that quantum particle experiments, even of that early era, dictated simultaneous outcomes. In this case, a dead alive cat, as his thought experiment went. And in the 1950s, the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment was updated by a physicist named Hugh Everett, who pioneered the so-called many worlds interpretation, where he said, not only are there two cats, there are infinite cats and infinite outcomes, and we sometimes call those things different dimensions or different intersections of time. It's out of our purview, but it's the kind of thing that we may experience in moments, just like the astronaut aging experiments, or just like the BEM retrocausality experiments. I don't know that it's possible for me to wrap my mind around it on a day-to-day level, but the empiricism seems to be there.
Last two questions. Does time travel need to have intrinsic dimension in order for it to be traveled through an X and a Y axis at least? That's actually a good question.
That is a hell of a question. That is a hell of a question. And I don't know. I think that what we're dealing with, and part of what string theory is responding to, is the fact that we have empirical data. We have logical necessities for things that don't fit our common understanding of the laws of reality, such as axes and straight lines between 2 points. I mean, these are vexing questions, and that's why I think some theorists, at least since Schrodinger, really have been trying to come up with different models of reality, conceptual models, to explain what might be going on.
And would a watch be of any use during time travel?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, a watch, look, one could ask, would a toaster be of any use during time travel? You know, could I undo the burnt toast, or, you know, what have you? I think it less involves my orientation towards stuff that's going on in this particular frame of reference than it does the playing out of entirely different scenarios infinitely. So it seems to me that you'd be a kind of leaping, so to speak, slipping into another completely persuasive reality, as we may be doing an infinite number of times across just this very interview. And we're going to find things in that reality that seem as real and as precedented to us as the words I'm speaking, but are not necessarily going to be the same thing, the same object, the same me, the same eye, the same watch.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It works in a lot of movies and a lot of shows, but yeah, you might go and there's 13 o'clock. That'd be crazy.
And we haven't even addressed what is it, the Morlocks? Is that who the guy fights?
Right.
Right. Do we have to deal with them?
Yes. H.G. Wells. Genius. Absolute genius.
For real?
All right. I think that's gonna wrap it up for us. I think we are
Pleasure.
gonna Mark, Mitch. I suck. Mitch, sorry, too many M's. It was actually great talking to you.
Mark, don't sweat it.
Screw Mark. No.
Mom said, I don't like Mitch.
Yeah. Mitch, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I do.
Thank you,
man. Don't forget to reserve the comic on Kickstarter. Link will be below. Weed Inc. and Quantum Physics, a comic book by Mark Victor, published by Paranormal X Media. And that's really cool that this is happening. I love the independent comic scene for the most part. And I think we're seeing the most exciting things in it because mainstream comics has just gone downhill. So I think it's gonna meet a need that is out there, because there's still a huge comic book audience out there. I went to MegaCon. There was 150,000 people there. So there's a lot of people who are interested in comics still. I'm your host, Gary Buechler. And in just a couple of weeks, who are we chatting with? Who are we chatting with, Bethany? May 30th. We will be chatting with somebody on May 30th. My God, this is run just like our live streams on Nerdrotic. This is great. No, it's a little better. Until then, grab a copy of Weed Inc. if you are interested. And again, we thank Mark Victor and Mitch Horowitz. Everybody have a great day. We're still live on my end. Hang on. What's up? What's up, chat? Catch you later.
Oh, I think it's back.
Okay, it's on.
You're still alive. Well done.
I'm still alive.
Mitch?